let's hop right into it. First of all, you're going to need your pattern. You can purchase this off my website. A yard of fabric, preferably lycra spandex, pins. You're also going to need some weights to hold your pattern down. You're going to need a rotary cutter. I use a 45mm one. You're going to need some scissors. You're going to need a 1/4 inch elastic. You're going to need 3/8 elastic. And this is optional. 1 inch elastic. 1.5 inch elastic. And your buckles, 1 inch or 1.5 inch. Your loop turner, your metal ruler, and your cutting board. Once you printed your pattern, this is how the layout should look. And once you're done setting up your pattern, taping it and putting it together, you're going to want to go ahead and start cutting your bands. You'll be cutting your shoulder bands and the buckle bands if you purchase the buckles off my website. So for your bands, you're going to want to start cutting beginning with your 3/8 elastic, which you're going to cut at 3.5 centimeters. And for your 1 inch elastic, if you purchase the 1 inch buckles, you're going to want to cut at 7 centimeters. And for the 1.5 inch elastic, for the 1.5 inch buckle, you're going to want to cut at 9.5 centimeters. Once you're done with the bands, our next step is to start cutting the actual swimsuit pieces. When laying down the fabric, you always want to make sure that you lay it so that the grain lines are vertically on the pattern. This will give the swimsuit more stretch versus cutting it horizontally on the grain lines. Another tip is when you lay your pattern down onto the fabric, you try and save as much fabric as possible. Saving fabric saves you from running to the store in case any mistakes are made during the process. So now that I found a good portion of it, go ahead and lay your weights onto the pattern and be sure the pattern is completely flat on the fabric. Before you start cutting, be sure you have a good blade on your rotary cutter. Now go ahead and start cutting around the pattern. You will also be sure to apply pressure so that when cutting it, the blade goes through both of the layers. Okay, now that we're done with the front part, we're going to want to go ahead and lay the fabric again, and we're going to start cutting the back portion of it. Once you're done cutting, don't forget to cut the notches on the back pieces. The notches will be your mark for the shoulder bands. Now the next step is cutting the elastic for your bands. You'll be cutting your elastic for your shoulder bands and your waistbands. You can estimate about how long the elastic should be by wrapping it around your waist or by placing the elastic over your shoulder from the front to the back. The size of the elastic is on the step-by-step instructions, but it varies based on the elasticity of the elastic. Now our next step is to start sewing our bands with the elastic. If you're not comfortable using the serge without any pins on the bands, go ahead and pin and use the straight stitch, or pin and use the serge with the pins. Be sure to remove the pins once you get close to the needles. Now that we've sewn our bands, we're going to use our loop turner to turn over our bands. Insert your loop turner and grab the very tip of the band, close the hook and slowly pull back. Now our next step is to put two of the pieces together. So you're going to want to grab one of your front pieces and one of your back pieces. Make sure that the fabric is right side with right side, and you're going to sew on the wrong side. When you're serging the pieces together, sew just a little portion and grab onto the end and match it. Then grab onto the middle and continue serging. You'll be sewing all three sides on this first set, and on the second set, you will only sew the side seams. Or if you'd like, on the second set, you can serge the inseam as well and just use a seam ripper to open the inseam. or use the straight stitch and leave an opening. Okay, our next step is to grab our outer set, the one that doesn't have the opening on the inseam. Now grab your shoulder bands and use your straight stitch to sew the bands onto the front. Leave about a 1/4 inch distance from the sides and sew at a 1/4 inch. Then, straight stitch the other ends onto the notches we made when we first cut the swimsuit. Once this step is done, it should look something like this. Okay, now that we're done sewing our lining and our outer layer, you're going to want to flip the pieces so that you match the right side with right side. Now line and pin all around the top portion. Remember, our outside layer is the one with the bands and our lining is the one with the opening. Okay, now that we have everything cut, aligned, and pinned, we're gonna go ahead and start sewing the swimsuit together. We'll be sewing on the wrong side of our outer layer and be sure to sew at a 1/4 inch. Okay, we're gonna sew over the seam we've already made for the band. When you get to the front portion where the band connects, be sure to sew as close as possible to the band as you can. This is what gives it that clean finish when you flip it over. Okay, now it's time to add our 1/4 inch elastic. So make sure you align it right at the corner and as close as you can to the seam you created. You're going to want to start there and you're going to slightly pull on the elastic and then you're going to just sew all around right by your 1/4 inch seam. Same thing with the other end. You're going to finish at the very corner of the seam that you've already created and it should look something like this. Once you're done, you're going to flip it inside out. Okay, so this is the part where it gets tricky. So you're gonna match right side with right side. So you're gonna match the leg portion of it. You're gonna match the hip portion and the inseam portion. You're going to pin it all around and then you're gonna sew the leg opening. It's the same concept as you did with the top portion. Okay, now that you got it all pinned down, you're gonna want to sew that leg opening. Make sure to sew at a 1/4 inch and then once you're done sewing that, you're going to also attach your elastic. You're going to sew your 1/4 inch elastic on the wrong side of the outside layer, which is the one without the opening. Again, you can give it a slight pull when you sew the elastic just to give it a little bit of tension so that it doesn't flare. Okay, now that that side is done, you're going to apply this same step onto the other leg opening. Flip the swimsuit inside out again so you can get a better idea on where you'll be pinning and sewing. You're going to go from the inseam to the hip and from the hip to the inseam back again and add the elastic. Okay, now we're finally getting to the last part. Now all we have to do is serge the straight seams we've created. You're going to go over all the straight seams that you did. You're going to get as close as you can to the elastic. If you have to cut a little bit of the material, do so it can give it a nice finish once you flip it over. Okay, now that you're done serging all of the sides, you're going to flip it right side out. And you're going to hand sew the inseam opening using a needle and the colored thread to match your swimsuit. Okay, next, you're going to grab your buckle straps and using your needle, you're going to fold over about 1 inch and you're going to hand sew to give it a nice clean finish. Once you're done with that end, you will hand sew the other end as well. We're done! This completes the step-by-step video. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe for future videos. If you have any questions, be sure to drop a comment and let me know what other tutorials you'd like to see for future videos.